Welcome to Bennington, where the music is everywhere and it's almost never what you'd expect. Thank you, Susie and music faculty. As a side note, happy birthday, Nicole Arrington, wherever you're hiding. Bennington regards education as essential and ethical, no less than an intellectual process. It seeks to liberate and nurture the individuality, the creative intelligence, and the ethical and aesthetic sensibility of its students, to the end that their richly varied natural endowments will be directed toward self-fulfillment and toward constructive social purposes. We believe that these educational goals are best served by demanding of our students active participation in the planning of their own programs and in the regulation of their own lives on campus. Student freedom is not the absence of restraint, however. It is rather the fullest possible substitution of habits of self-restraint for restraint imposed by others. The exercise of student freedom is the very condition of a meaningful education, and it is an essential aspect of the nurture of free citizens dedicated to civilized values and capable of creative and constructive membership in modern society. Some version of that statement has been read to every Bennington class since the first. Welcome, Bennington students, to the ranks of all those who came before you, who built themselves in that mold, a mold which you will all break and remake in your time here. Welcome to your Bennington educations. You will hear from a number of important people this morning, very important people. They're going to tell you about Bennington in this moment, about all that makes this education possible. You'll get to meet them, you'll get to know them, you'll come to honor, respect, and love them. And with that, I would like to welcome Eve Meffert, Chair of the Student Educational Policy Committee.
Thank you all for being here, and welcome back to Bennington. I've been asked to speak about how Bennington College is defined by the people who live, work, and study here. In my time at Bennington, I've seen incredible lasting legacies, as well as transformative changes from one year to the next. Bennington has taught me academic inquiry and creative expression, but even more profoundly, it has helped me understand the powers we are shaped by and the power we have to shape the systems we're in. Bennington's system has enormous potential for creating leverage points. Bennington students can be in the unique position of hearing about the issues of immigration in America one day and proposing a pop-up class on the subject the next. We have the ability to generate community knowledge systems and shape the curriculum to shine light on our passions. This most crucial undertaking happens at all levels of life here at Bennington. And it's best when it's shared. I should tell you that one of the best moments to come out of a class is when one student got up the nerve to ask the definition of neoliberalism, and about half the class sighed in relief. The work of learning is best accomplished when we ask questions and speak to be understood, not when we speak to demonstrate our own brilliance. At the ecosystemic level, we shape Bennington by understanding that we are learning from everyone around us. Furthermore, we share membership in this community with students, faculty, staff, as well as Bennington residents. So I urge you to open up your spheres of interaction. I've spoken with incredible teachers, activists, students, and business owners from our community and learned so much from the experience. We also have a duty as members of this community to give back to our town. I've seen my peers develop incredible projects, from creating local radio shows to developing skill shares and researching water pollution. Students have created a seed library that community members can use to grow their own fresh produce, organized for the rights of migrant workers through GANAS, and published research leading to local prison and justice system reforms. We may just be one small school, but as Howard Zinn says, would it be possible to declare boldly that the aim of all schools is to find solutions for poverty, for injustice, for race and national hatred? This proposal may indeed be bold, but it starts when we look for the meaningful applications of our work in the greater world. At the micro scale, we impact our surroundings every day. We are shaped by the conditions here, but we are also active in shaping one another's experience at Bennington. Students here have done incredible work through clubs and organizations to advocate for racial, socioeconomic, and ability justice, as well as organizing against sexual violence. I'm sure as you spend time here, you, like the best of us, will find your own bones to pick. We are here because we chose a student-centered education. We chose a school that enabled us to shape our worlds for the better. I urge you to use that impulse to make a change, make a coalition, bring people together, join a club or start one of your own, and a shameless plug, if you're interested in academic policy, consider joining SCPC. Shaping Bennington can take many forms. So I leave you with this. As you inevitably shape this place, understand your historical and institutional context. Consider what it might mean to be in the university, but not of it. Question received wisdom, as scholar Roderick Ferguson says, we should emulate those independent filmmakers and writers who knew that the tools of their trade were colonized. Artists who nevertheless put those tools to alternative uses so that other stories could be told. These acts of shaping are not confined to overtly political disciplines. Chicana artist and activist Gloria Anzaldúa notes that for many of us, the acts of writing, painting, performing, and filming are deliberate and desperate acts of determination to subvert the status quo. Don't let diversity become bureaucratized and divested of transformative potentials. As Ferguson says, when institutions say yes, that is also a moment of jeopardy. Finally, care for one another and let that caring be radical. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Holly Anderson. I am the project manager for the planning office here at Bennington. I get to plan construction projects every day. I'm happy to report that I have the best and most fun job here on campus. It's true. Over the course of my almost 10 years at Bennington, I have acted, among other things, as the benevolent overlord for construction means and methods, and turbo nag of everything involving efficient technologies and sustainable building systems. At the moment, I'm playing the role of antagonizer-in-chief of the Commons Project, keeping the general contractor to task of renovating our most sacred of campus buildings, and working with a broad team of engineers, architects, and subcontractors to get it right. Construction is the game I get to play every day here at Bennington, and it is definitely a game. There are different players, there are different constraints, there are different ways to win, it's super fun. Don't get me wrong, construction is not a cakewalk, especially since I do not resemble a typical construction manager. I can usually gauge how well I'm doing at my job by what's colorfully written about me on the job site portage on walls are, what is being said about me at a high volume in the job trailer, and I wouldn't want it any other way. I was lucky enough to grow up spending time with my father on his construction projects at Cornell University, where he was the project manager for the utilities department for 42 years. Watching my dad made it very clear to me that people who work hard love life, and working hard was important. He would bring me along to check out water main breaks that flooded whole buildings, underground utility projects, watch construction and repair of underground steam lines. Steam line projects are the most fun. And electrical infrastructure. From all this, I became intrigued with the underbelly of campus, the hidden inner workings that keep the modern world going. I have vivid memories of being woken up on weekend mornings asking if I wanted to go to campus with him. There was an active steam leak and there was asphalt boiling. Did I want to go? I quickly figured out that construction sites usually have donuts, so I was always in. I knew from an early age that this was a world I wanted to be part of. And since I learned that engineers have to sit at a desk all day, I would be 0% good at that. I decided to pursue construction management as a career. My sister and I were the first in our family lineage to go to college. We were afforded modest higher educations, and as a result, I've had a multifaceted construction career that brought me ultimately to Bennington. I learned early on from everyone at Bennington, most notably Joan Goodrich, who is now retired, but who performed nearly every job at the college at some point during her nearly 40 years here. You can visit her garden behind Crossett Library. That being here is far more than a 9-to-5 endeavor, far more than a job, but an induction into a community, into the fabric of an institution that has become my working family. This isn't to say that we don't work hard here at Bennington, because we do work hard, and we do work hard, and we do love what we do. The students here know, and new students will quickly learn, that every human on this campus is here to teach you something. Everyone here is a mentor, has something to share with you, and we are here to learn from you too. We are the Bennington family. The barn is full of people who will help you make better financial decisions, assist with employment goals, and guide you in making life decisions. For those of you who are first in your families to go to college like me, make sure to tap into those resources. Ask lots of questions, consult with everyone here, and just do your best every day. I got a D- the first time I took calculus, and I was super proud of it. Those outside our immediate on-campus communities enrich our experiences here, bringing the world to Bennington. It is also our job to take Bennington out into the world. I do this by teaching snowboarding on the weekends. I train instructors how to teach. I travel to ski resorts across the country to teach all populations of riders with disabilities, anyone who wants to be out on the mountain. I volunteer at Wounded Warrior and Warrior in Action programs in water skiing and snowboarding whenever I'm able. I sit on 2 boards of examiners. I give instructor exams across the East Coast. I coach on both of my daughter's baseball teams, and I volunteer in my daughter's school's parent-teacher group. Sleep is optional. We work and volunteer in our communities to do the most good whenever we can, to make the greater community our home, and because the world needs more Bennington, and the world needs more Bennington now more than ever. Every facet of the Bennington community is full of brilliance and beauty. Friends are the family we meet along the way, and we are all here ready to meet you. Erin McKinney makes everything on campus she touches more intricate and beautiful. When you are in dire need of a laugh or comic relief, seek out Chris Adams in IT, Nicole Arrington in Communications, happy birthday, I'm sorry I didn't know, or Ken Collimer in Campus Safety. They could put anyone on the current cast of SNL to shame. Todd Teclari, our systems manager in buildings and grounds, is a genius and can fix everything except for maybe a rainy day. Visit Teresa Scholes in the bookstore. She will help you with anything you need and is rad. The people here are kind and caring. When you're given the opportunity to provide feedback, tell them what they're doing right first. Hold open doors, stop at stop signs, say please and thank you. Please learn your housekeeper's name. As proud as I am of the people at Bennington, I'm equally proud of the work we're doing to conserve and protect our natural resources. During the past 10 years, we've implemented dozens of energy-saving efficiency projects, which together have saved, 1,337 tons of carbon dioxide from being released into the atmosphere, saved 2,311 kilowatt hours, and have saved the college more than $380,000 in electrical costs alone. We also recently entered into an agreement to purchase about approximately 75% of our campus electricity from Vermont-based solar arrays. Please help me with this. Yeah. It's awesome. Oh, please help me with this. Turn off your lights when you leave a room. Close doors and windows when you can. Recycle. Every small act of conservation, no matter how insignificant it may seem at the moment, is a subtle but vital act of resistance. That, when combined in aggregate with thousands of other small gestures that demonstrate care and awareness, we can create a critical mass of change. It's easy work, but meaningful and important. I hope you get to become more yourselves here. Be safe and be well. I could keep talking, though I hope Stephanie Hurley baked today and her cookies are not to be missed. Welcome home.
Thank you, Eve and Holly. I'm Isabel Roche. I'm the Provost and Dean of the college. Welcome again to our new students. And to our returning students, faculty, and staff, welcome to this new academic year and to all of the promise that it holds. Before you hear from today's faculty speaker, I'd like to say a few words about Bennington faculty, who they are, and what they do. The faculty at Bennington hold expertise in many domains and fields of studies. They are scientists and musicians, writers and philosophers, artists and anthropologists. What is common across the broad and rich range of expertise among our faculty is that they are makers and doers. They are practitioners of what they teach, and they bring that work into the classroom with you. Bennington faculty possess what might be called a productive restlessness. They know a lot about a lot, but they aren't content ever to recycle what they know and constantly model the intellectual rush of learning something new. Bennington faculty will serve as your mentors and guides. They will challenge and push you. They will take you seriously in ways that you will only begin to appreciate long after you've left Bennington. You will receive honest, nuanced feedback from them. The observations and insights they offer about your strengths, habits, and opportunities for growth are a tremendous gift. It also requires that you develop your ability to hear the sometimes difficult truths about where you can do better. But with our faculty, there will be less telling you what to do and more asking you what you want to do than you have ever experienced before. You will be asked questions that only you can answer. What are you interested in? What threads connect? What kind of work drives you? And then you will be asked to use those answers to put together the trajectory of your education. Our commencement statement, referenced earlier by Mariko, also affirms that education here at Bennington is a reciprocal affair. Exchange with faculty is not only a process, but a value. Your thinking will be pushed and shaped and changed by the work you do with your faculty in the ways I've just described. At the same time, your faculty will learn over and over and over again from working with you. It is my great pleasure to introduce Bennington College faculty member Michael Dumanis, who teaches literature.
Thank you to Mariko and Isabel for asking me to speak to you this morning. And class of 2022, it is my pleasure to welcome you to your first Tuesday at Bennington and to your first year of college. And welcome back to all the faculty and staff and returning students. I am beginning my 7th year here at Bennington, teaching poetry, directing the Poetry at Bennington reading series, and serving as editor of the literary magazine, Bennington Review. So this must be the 7th convocation I've attended. I feel both as though I've been here for an eternity and as though I'm only now just starting to discover this weird place. Though this campus has only about 20 buildings, give or take, that are in dorms, I still somehow manage to find myself lost, or at least turned around, trudging up the hill toward Jennings, past the secret garden and the orchard and the pond. There's something inherently overwhelming about being here, perhaps because of the surprising, unexpected architecture, perhaps because of the striking natural landscape and sheer amount of open space, and also because of the intensity, inventiveness, and passion of so many participants in this unique community. Over the past 6 years, I have had conversations in class that have permanently affected my understanding of a book, been asked brilliant questions by students in the middle of a discussion that completely threw me off guard, and been astounded by the boldness, sophistication, and ambition of some of the advanced work I've seen students undertake. It is likewise easy to find oneself overwhelmed by the history of the place and by the extraordinary faculty and students who wandered through the barn before us and stared off the end of the world decades prior, leaving our atmosphere heavy with their presence. It's pretty awesome and one of a kind, and yes, overwhelming, this college that was built here in the middle of the woods for people of singular character and wild imagination to come together to collaborate and live and talk and share and discover together and make and perform and find. The poet Ezra Pound once defined poetry as news that stays news, while the poet William Carlos Williams added, "It's difficult to get the news from poems, yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there." And so I wanted to begin by sharing with you a piece of news about what your experience at Bennington may feel like on occasion, namely this short poem that opens the new issue of Bennington Review, the national print literary magazine that students and I collaboratively edit and produce here at the college. It's by a writer from New York named Jose Hernandez Diaz. The Man and the Antlers. A man picked wild berries in the forest, ate them, and suddenly grew antlers. He was shocked. He ran around in circles. Why? Why? Then he saw a small creek. He looked into the water. He saw his antlers in the reflection, strong and sharp. "Why me?" he said. "Why me?" Then a bear approached him. He was startled for a moment, but then charged at the bear with force. Several observations about the poem I just read you. 1, some of you, at least a few of you, perhaps more than a few, heard that I was going to read somebody's poem right now and reflexively thought, I don't understand poetry. Or, while listening to the poem, thought, I do understand poetry, I know what poetry is, and that's not poetry. Or, wait, why did the man grow antlers? I don't get it. And that's okay. I don't understand poetry either. At least not in the way I understand a newspaper article. But I do know that when I hear language doing something new or unusual or different or wild, something that causes me to stop or take note, something that leads me to see myself or others through a different lens or from an unexpected vantage point than I otherwise would, I get startled for a moment, and then I want to charge at it with force. 2, some of the wisest decisions that you make seem a little crazy when you first decide to make them, when you are conscious of the risks you're taking, but don't yet have a sense of the reward. It might occasionally feel like you are eating random berries in a forest, not really knowing what will happen next. But nourishment and transformation come in all forms. 3, in your life in general, and in your time at Bennington in particular, should you chance to encounter metaphorical bears, remember that you do have metaphorical antlers, talents you didn't realize were talents until the bear showed up. I am here to tell you, use your antlers. There will be an occasion in your years here when you are confronted by an assignment, writing an essay, imagining a play, plotting a short story, conducting a scientific experiment or anthropological fieldwork, facing the creation of anything new, when you will feel scared, not up to the mission, a bit unsteady on your feet, afraid perhaps of failure. My advice is to charge at the challenge with great force. You might not get that bear on your first try. In fact, you might never get that bear. Deer and moose, let alone people with antlers, are not particularly known for taking down great beasts. That said, from the process of taking on the bear, successfully or otherwise, you will learn about yourself and what you're capable of. You will find out what your antlers can do. As the great playwright Samuel Beckett famously wrote, "Ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better." Of course, this advice should not be taken literally were you to meet an actual bear at Bennington. Speaking of bears, and of meeting them at Bennington, one of my favorite memories is of something that occurred my first year here. A student suddenly writes on Facebook one evening, "Oh my God, there's a bear next to the Center for the Advancement of Public Action!" Exclamation point. 30 minutes later, another student replies, "Oh my God, there's another bear behind Franklin!" Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. And then an esteemed member of the literature faculty writes in, not using any exclamation points, "Guys, I think it might be the same bear." This is an excellent example of the sort of finely honed critical reasoning skills that you, under the guidance of distinguished faculty, may develop in your time at college. Over the next 4 years, you're going to be outside Kappa, and you're going to be outside Franklin. You're going to be studying, experiential anatomy, the history of jazz, metal sculpture fabrication, screenwriting, the Latinx avant-garde, cross-cultural psychology, architectural graphics, how to construct a corset, how to compose for a choir, how to write poems in Chinese. You'll be an actor, an astronomer, a botanist, a painter, an activist for causes you believe in. And although it doesn't seem plausible, given the remarkable range of these pursuits and the physical spaces you find yourself in, you will always in the end be the same bear. Nobody knows now the person you are going to become or the approaches you will need to take to find that person. To figure it out, you should let yourself wander and give yourself permission, if you're at all like me, to get a little overwhelmed and a little bit lost. Something I often say to my poetry students is something a professor, the poet Jory Graham, once told me in grad school. She said, if you want to write a poem and you start at point A and you have this point B in mind that you want to get to, and you jot down all the lines you need to write in order to move from point A to point B, and you successfully arrive at point B, you might have expressed yourself, but you haven't actually written a poem. If, however, over the course of writing a poem, you discover a point X you weren't previously aware of, that you couldn't have discovered if you hadn't started writing, if instead of heading to point B, you swerve to reach this newfound destination, that journey you took to get to point X, that's your poem. The value of this swerve and the consequent journey applies not only to poetry, but to virtually every endeavor. You won't know what you're looking for until you find it. My responsibility as a professor here at Bennington is to help you give yourself the permission to step out of your comfort zone, to curve, to zigzag, to leave behind what you think you know, to embark on your journey toward an unknown point X. The faculty and staff would like to provide you with the tools and support that will enable you to formulate the questions you may need to ask in order to discover where you're headed. I know this from my own experience. I came to school under the delusion that I wanted to be, of all things, a political operative or pollster. I really don't know what I was thinking, but in my first semester, I excitedly signed up for a 300-person early morning lecture called Introduction to Political Science, where I often sat in the back row so I could comfortably sleep. This was a valuable and formative experience. It may surprise anyone who 25 years ago witnessed a dormant 17-year-old in the last pew of the first floor auditorium in Bloomberg Hall to hear that he was actually actively engaged in that moment in an eminently productive enterprise, that to this day he's grateful for the direction in which this political science course pushed him. I was finding out that I was not well suited to passively receiving information in a cavernous lecture hall, that I wanted instead to engage in small group conversations with interesting people. And while I to this day remain genuinely interested in the machinery of politics, that this was not my calling. I am not encouraging you to sleep in class. I am encouraging you to consider that academic wrong turns can be highly worthwhile, that finding out what you don't like may prove every bit as rewarding as finding out what you do, that sometimes it's really good for expectations to be dashed. The person who had the greatest influence on my undergraduate education, and in fact on my present life, is the late poet Mark Strand. I first saw Mark read on my campus my freshman year, and he was funny and clever in his banter between poems, and I thought, I want to take a class with this man. He seems like an interesting person. 2 years later, I got my chance. I signed up to take his intro poetry course. This was my first ever poetry writing class, and I might never have taken one otherwise. In many respects, it wasn't the class I expected. Instead of conducting a regular workshop where 15 students sit around a table and give each other feedback about their writing, Mark would spend the first half of class reading published poems he liked to a room of 35 students, and then we would take turns standing up and reading our own poems out loud to him. Mark, without looking at the poems, would offer a sentence or two of advice off the cuff, and then we would move on to the next poem. It was the most intimidating thing I'd ever done in class. One day, I stood shakily to read what I had stayed up writing the night before, and Mark paused, looked at me, and said, "That's too complicated. I can't respond to that just yet. There seems to be a lot going on, and I'd probably have to look at your poem before I gave you feedback." The following week, I nervously approached him and said, "Mark, I really like your class, but maybe it would be better if you just met with me one-on-one to look at my poems." To this day, I don't know where I got the courage to ask the former poet laureate of the United States for private lessons. To my shock, Mark turned his steely gaze on me, looked at me carefully, and said, "Let's start meeting once a week, every Wednesday at 8 in the morning." And for the rest of my time in college, he would spend an hour every week going line by line through every poem I brought into his office. And that, for me, was the real beginning of everything. But I didn't know it then. I didn't know if my poems were any good or what it meant for a poem to be good. Sometimes I felt, when I sat down to write, that I was a blindfolded child at a birthday party, trying to pin the tail on the donkey, but stumbling instead into the table with the punch bowl, about descended crashing to the floor. Another former teacher, the poet Mark Doty, wrote once that the new arrives with its edges raw, a phrase that crawled into my brain and wouldn't leave. Most of the new things I tried to make at first felt raw and odd and unfamiliar. But at the same time, it was so exciting to find myself writing all these poems that I didn't understand. To let words and images collide in sudden ways before I quite knew what was happening. I realized that I loved what I was doing, so I might as well keep at it. A few years ago, Mariko invited a group of distinguished literature alumni to have dinner together in New York and talk about how studying literature at Bennington helped shape their development as writers. The first person to respond was an alum from the 70s, Alec Wilkinson, the author of 10 books, who since 1980 has been a staff writer at The New Yorker. "I didn't take a single literature class at Bennington," he said to audible surprise. "I was a music student. I spent all my time in Jennings. I wanted to be a rock and roll musician, and I tried to do that after leaving college. And then I spent a year as a policeman on Cape Cod. And afterwards, when I turned 24, I wondered what I should do next. And I decided I would write a book and show my writing to the editor of The New Yorker. And later he gave me a job. But though I didn't take a single literature class, Bennington was instrumental in making me a writer because it taught me that if I want to do something, I should just go for it and not worry about whether or not I can, whether or not I have the preparation, that I was ultimately capable of anything. Dear class of 2022, you are ultimately capable of anything. My advice is to take chances, mistrust the already familiar, make choices that surprise or even intimidate you. Every year, take a class in a subject you genuinely know nothing about. If a course description at first blush sounds overly rigorous, take it. Rise to the occasion. The class is probably going to be more exciting and has a higher chance of being life-changing. Here, we don't have requirements, but we do have opportunities. Every course is a door you can walk through. This all holds true outside the classroom, too. Try making friends who are different from anyone you've previously met. Wander into the poetry readings in Tishman and Franklin. Go to Dean Carriage Barn to listen to experimental drumming and traditional folk music. Think about studying abroad in a place you never imagined yourself visiting, let alone living in. Consider applying to fieldwork terms that sound like they might stretch and expand and challenge your talents and worldview. Every new student here arrived on campus with a set of expectations. What your house will be like, who your friends will be and what you'll talk about, how cold it might get in Vermont, what you will do on weekends, what you'll study, what your classes will demand from you. I am here to tell you that your expectations will not be met. The reality will be richer and stranger, more surprising, and I hope more compelling than you can imagine. It is inevitable that your aesthetic will shift and your ideas will change. You should let them. Some of the most exciting work I have seen done by students at Bennington involve radical swerving. The textiles major from RISD, who transferred here to study anthropology and then took a poetry class on a whim and ended up writing a poetry thesis in addition to their senior anthropological research, then spent half a year in Iceland at an art residency making spacesuits out of fiber, then went to get an MFA in poetry from the Iowa Writers Workshop, work as a curatorial fellow at Studio Museum Harlem and MoMA, and publish a book. The student who came here to focus on poetry, but then discovered modern dance during a fieldwork term in Brooklyn and developed a plan of study in dance. Later also, having jumped into a class on incarceration in America, becoming passionately focused on prison reform. Over your time at Bennington, you will repeatedly be given the opportunity to pause and reflect, to consider how you see yourself and your environment, what work you have undertaken on your journey, where you still want to take yourself, what your expectations had been, and what they've become. Sometimes it may feel like instead of walking forward, you're moving sideways, or that you need to take several steps back in order to take just one step forward. And that's actually perfectly fine. The faculty and staff are all excited to have the opportunity to share this journey with you as you swerve and get overwhelmed and lost and make a few discoveries along the way and find yourself at least a little changed. Thank you.